Isn't that lovely? Welcome back, folks. For those of you who remember me as a collector prior to being in business selling fishing tackle, you'll know that I had a passion for brass and wooden reels. So whilst most of the rest of the earth were collecting hardies, I focused on brass. I did have one hardy reel. I had a Zane Grey in a leather case about this size, and I used it as a doorstop, much to the annoyance of the hardy guys that came and called in as they're flying up and down the M6. But anyway, brass reels I love, wooden reels I love. Very early brass reels I really love. Last week, well, it's a week before now actually, our Thomas Turner, we were very pleased to buy a collection of good early historic brass pieces. What do I consider early? This is what I consider early. Brass reels with spike fittings. Oh, hundreds of years old, working like you, absolutely amazing. But where do the spikes come from? Now, had I finished the third book I was going to write, The Best of British Brass, which I didn't or haven't written, but may do at some point, it would all become perfectly clear. But what I found is I had a renewed interest in spike winches, having seen these. And it's interesting, the mix of spikes that we've got here, generally considered Irish. Most of the named spikes I've had have been Irish. I've seen some Scottish ones, but it's generally Irish. A lot of them were made in England, especially through the Redditch and Birmingham areas. But if we just focus for a minute on what we've got here in front of us, there were more, they instantly sold. We've got 5 very different patterns here. So if I start with what we call a standard spike, this is a big one. It's a handful, 3-inch diameter. It's got the steel bridge, steel spike and the locking nut. Check mechanism in the back, beautiful. Something smaller, more akin to what we're used to seeing. This is a Kelly of Dublin, which we do see a few of over the years. Very fine check on it, filled with wholesale line, which is great. And it's got its iron and steel spike and its locking nut. A variant on this is a little wide drum multiplying winch. There we go. Spike, probably a replacement lyre screw on there, which still works lovely. And then an oddball variant again. This is a Weeks of Dublin plate wind reel. So it's not a crank arm. Lovely, lovely made. On its original steel spike and bridge. And the check mechanism is riveted underneath the faceplate. Probably can't see it from there, but there are 4 very fine polished rivet heads showing through there. Very early rare piece. It kind of covers the progression or lack of progression that spike winch has made. I've taken a couple of illustrations out of some of the working documents I had for the book, and if you zoom up on your phones or your iPads, on the top of here is an advert in 1662 from Venables. There is a collar winch sitting on the top right hand side. That's a clamp fitting winch like this, and it has what appears to be a brass or iron handle on it. Now that's 1662. On the right hand side, from Salter's book illustration of 1814, there is a collar winch, clamp fitting winch there. Again, same to this. So you may say that if the collar winches go back 1662, when did the spike come in? Well, it's very difficult to tell. You would think spikes come in the late 1700s. I think they did. I haven't found a spike illustration from 1600. So it seems to be a weird thing where we have a collar winch and a spike and a collar, a spike and a collar and a foot blade perforated to take a leather pad to stop it coming off. So you think, well, that's fairly easy. We got a collar winch, going to a spike winch, staying with a collar winch, and at the same time, you get a very early winch, which has got a foot blade. And if I show you the spike we looked at earlier, which is this one, you can see the similarity there in style to the multiplier, but it's got a spike on it. So that messes things up. To mess it up even more, at the bottom here is an illustration taken from the Alex Martin catalogue of 1913. Now the reels predate that by an awful long time. And they have here 5 wooden reels 4 of them being a Scottish pern, which is wooden for a bobbin, and 1 of them being a Nottingham reel. Now the pern, the idea of the pern was that it would have a yoke of wood at the top with a hole in it, and you would literally stab the rod into it with a pad, and that would wedge itself to become your reel. The variant on that was some of the perns were called belly perns. So instead of fitting on the rod, you would wrap a belt around your waist, the pern would sit here, the line would go up through the rod, and with 2 hands you would cast your line. Sounds a good idea. That leaves both hands free to do it. But reverting to this image, and I didn't see this the first time I took it out, in the middle here there is a pern and it's got a spike. So Scotland are focusing on the wooden perns, but they bring out a spike. England, Ireland, Wales, if you like, have got collars, feet and spikes, and it's all a bit of a jumble. So I was going to start, I have got a box file about this thick of information on the reels, and when I've got a couple of minutes, one lifetime, I'll start putting together the information, because I think these are fascinating pieces of history. We don't see many of them, and for us to get a clutch of around 10 spike fitting winches within a bunch of whole other reels, it's quite a unique collection. If I show you just for a second before we go how the spike fits, you undo the brass little locky knob at the bottom. We've modified a Greenheart rod here which does have a foot fitting on it, but I've modified it just to show you. The spike rod would just simply have a hole. The spike fits through the rod, the locking nut goes on the bottom, so, and it's an absolutely rigid fitting to go on the rod. You could, in effect, drill your rod all the way up and move where the spike goes, but generally it would either have just a plain hole or it would have a brass band and it would be drilled through. So that's a spike fitting winch onto a made-up spike rod. The rods are actually rarer than the reels. We did last year have a Flint of Dublin spike with a Flint of Dublin rod. So, and they were correct to each other. So that was, if you like, a matched pair out the shop. So there's a piece of kit, 200-year-old, and it's sold now and gone to a museum. And that's where these pieces need to go, either onto a commercial museum or a museum in your house where you can look at them, enjoy them. The pink tags you're seeing here means they're actually live on the website now. So if you want a piece of history, not just another brass reel, because brass reels are still available in the 1960s, you could buy one from Milbro, but a real piece of history that we can backdate into hundreds of years. These are the boys to collect. So look on the website, they're all on. As usual, make sure that you're logged on to the newsletter. That gives you 10% loyalty discount, including these. And more importantly, it gives you the updates as far as the videos are concerned and the blogs that we write. So have a log on and enjoy them. They're great historical pieces. My favourite.